I'm Dr. Lynn Sandra Kahn, and I have a warning about episodes 17 through 22. You may be triggered by our conversations regarding the failures of family law, family court, foster care, medical kidnapping, and parental alienation. Please, if you have been caught up in the child welfare system, find your support group. You are not alone. The system is broken and abusive. Two places to start are the website rachelbruno.com, as we discuss in episode 17, and on Facebook, the page Family Forward Project with Connie Reguli, as we discuss in episode 19. Please find your support group. You are not alone. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to my podcast, The Government Mechanic. I am your host, Dr. Lynn Sandra Kahn, and I am the Government Mechanic. This is episode 21, and we are going to look under the hood at all the different elements of government and some of the agencies that are creating such an abusive and dysfunctional child welfare system. My wonderful guests back today together. We have from episode 17, Rachel Bruno. From episode 18, Bailey Templeton. From episode 19, Terri LaPoint. And from episode 20, Connie Reguli. And someone who has been co-hosting these Under the Hood segments with me, Kathy Monahan, strategic planner and management consultant. So what I'm really interested in is what are the really important changes that need to happen so that this whole system is disrupted and made functional, if that's possible. And what was really interesting to me in thinking about this, it's like each branch of government is part of it. So there's legislation that you all have been looking at. There's what can happen with those agencies that are actually interpreting the law and interpreting the policies. And then there's the court system. So it's all kind of messed up. But why don't we start with the legislative stuff? What do you think is really important that's happening and what might happen in the future? Connie, you've been active the longest. Why don't we start with you?
Okay, thank you. And thank you again, Lynn, for just even opening your mouth and talking about this very, very important subject. And I also just want to thank all these other warriors that are on here with us today. You know, Terri and Bailey and Rachel have been such great warriors in trying to make changes. Bailey and Rachel had personal experiences that was very devastating to their families. Terri, I've met as a reporter, and she's covered very important topics. So I came into this as a lawyer, and I started 30 years ago. And as a second career, I want people to know, because I had a whole lifetime ahead of me before I came into law, which is very important because I viewed every single case as people and not as file folders and pleadings and court orders. Every single case to me was a person's life. And so I looked at it much differently when I came into it. And, you know, the court system was, for me, the first glance of problems, big problems, because I could see as I walked in the courtrooms every day that there was so much just abuse and due process violations in that court process. I didn't even, honestly, when you're a lawyer, you open the law book and you look at the law, and very, very few lawyers ever say to themselves, what is this law doing in the law books? Like, we just take it as that is the way it is. And that's not the kind of person I am. So I started taking a look at the laws and what needed to change in the laws. And then that, of course, expanded into what laws needed to be changed at the federal level. So that's why through Family Forward Project, We are working both at the state legislative level as well as the federal legislative level, and trying to encourage and educate people who've been affected, who've been victims of the system, to engage with us, to become citizen lobbyists. And having citizens and put together forums and talking points and podcasts like you're doing is so valuable. And thank you so much.
Okay, why don't we ask Rachel and Bailey, who were in the court situation, if that was their experience when they got into the court system and found themselves in family court. Rachel?
Go first? Okay. Well, like you said, I was in this system just as a parent. I had absolutely no idea that such a system existed, right? And I assumed when I was told I was going to go to court that it was under constitutional law, criminal court, where it's the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. After all, you are talking about removing someone's child. Like, that's the equivalent of the death sentence to a parent. So I was assuming that there was going to be a trial, that there were going to be witnesses, that they were going to be questioned, that they were going to be cross-examined. And then after all that, they would decide whether to remove my child or not. And that is not how it works. You are guilty until proven innocent. And they make you jump through all the legal loopholes, all these different services, all whatever they can to prevent you from getting your child sooner. Because as we will find out, I'm sure Connie can go into this in more detail, the states get money for removing your child, which again, I had no idea such a system existed. I was fortunate enough that I had the money, I had the resources, I had my husband, I had my family support, that I was able to get a private attorney who was a bully. And you have to be a bully to fight these people. And I was able to get my children back within 40 days, which is a miracle. I'm sure Connie as well can tell you, most of these cases last anywhere from 6 months to 18 months. Mm-hmm. And that in the life of a child is like forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Bailey, was that your experience too?
Well, I have a surplus of experience with this because I was also in the family court system as a child. And I very clearly remember the hearing where I was put into foster care, as this was the definite decision. And my mother, my stepfather, my grandma, there was a lot of family members in the courtroom, which I didn't find that happening in my case at all. It was just me versus everybody else then. But they had asked around the room if anybody wanted to take me home. And I sat there and listened to every person say no. And at the end of that, I was put into foster care permanently until I aged out. That did not happen now, what would it be, about 15, 16 years later when they took my son. But I kind of like raised my hand even, can I say something in that first hearing to try to defend myself? And you're just not allowed to. There is no defense that you can have in the first hearing. And a lot of people, I don't know if it happened in every case, but for me, I didn't even have paperwork of the allegations by the time we got to the first hearing. I wasn't allowed a lawyer. I didn't even know what the allegations against me were. So there was no way that even trying to represent myself that first hearing, there would be no way that I would know what I was trying to defend, like what allegations were brought up against me in the first place. So I think the family court system is just so warped in the way that so much money, so many resources were spent for almost an entire year to hurt my family, when if the first hearing I'd been able to speak or had a lawyer to tell that this is a misunderstanding, it would have avoided all of those finances, all of that hurt, all of that trauma. And there must have been a big change between 15 years ago and now, when my entire family got to sit in the room as I was put in the state. But I was alone for every hearing of mine. I couldn't have a friend. Their stepfather wasn't allowed in there. It was just me versus all of them. And it's a very terrifying thing, especially when you're in the midst of, like Rachel, a medical emergency, like me, a medical emergency.
I'm so sorry that this happened to both of you. And it's traumatic for everybody involved. Traumatic for the child, traumatic for the parents, just a horrible situation that reverberates for years and years and years, and maybe even generations. Terri, you've been writing about a lot of this. Does that kind of fit with what you've seen across the country?
Tracks 100%. When I would investigate stories, and even the book that I've written, I would get the documents, the legal documents, and see what the social workers were saying and see what was happening, and the medical documents. And this is repeated over and over and over and over. Due process is like a unicorn in family court. It just is so rare that it happens. The first couple times I heard a parent say, well, the Constitution doesn't apply in family court, it was what they were told. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Of course the Constitution applies. This is court. This is America. The Constitution is, of course, where would it not apply? And then I'd hear it a half dozen times, and then a dozen, and then it was over and over. I must have heard it a couple of several hundred times from different people saying they were told that, either by the lawyer or a judge or somebody in their case, that the Constitution doesn't apply. They don't get the chance to speak. They're not represented by an attorney. They, like Bailey said, they're facing all of these accusers all by themselves. They feel very alone. They don't know that they don't have to agree to certain things. They're threatened at the door. I talked to somebody in my state the other day who had false allegations from a disgruntled ex, and CPS came to his door, and they told him, he was like, well, if I don't let you in. He didn't want to let him in, and they said, well, that's okay, we'll just, if you don't let us in, we're going to take your kids. So, and that's wrong. That's not legal, but they do it all the time. And so I wish this were rare, but this is the rule, not the exception.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the way to deal with the family court situation is to change the law. Is that what you're saying? And how would you change it?
Do you want me to take
One
off here?
thing that,
okay.
yeah.
So the head of the snake is funding. Okay, the head of the snake is funding. It's all about the money. There are so many ways that children are monetized in the system. We know that a child is removed and they get foster care dollars. About 40% of the state budget is federal money. Title 4E is an entitlement. It is not an appropriation. So it means that every child has a certain dollar figure on its head, but you have to take that child to get that money. So as an entitlement, it is pretty much a dollar for dollar match by the states. It is a use it or lose it program. It is never subject to sequester. So it is a guaranteed income stream as long as you have the head of that child under your control. That is federal legislation from 1974. The reality is, after multiple reauthorizations, that federal law has expired. It expired in September 2023 without reauthorization. And I attribute part of that to our hard work of going up to Washington, D.C., 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 times a year, tromping through those halls, sitting down with advocates and affected families and asking for legislation and bringing this to the attention. We have, in addition to that, we have worked out in the field, and we've worked out in the field with legislators. And, Terri can talk about in Alabama. Here in Tennessee, I've gone to the committee meetings multiple times, but they don't really want to hear it at the state level so long as they are being financially supported by that federal money. Most of the state legislators do not even understand the funding. They don't understand it. And so when CPS comes in and says, we need $1 billion budget, they're like, okay, I have never in a budget hearing heard them sit and break down where that money is coming from and how that money is attached to the head of the child. So everything, the court system, the legislative system, the administrative branch is all tied to money. So
Yep.
this is the legislatively. We went in last year. Actually, we started the fall before that and said, we want a simple bill. We want a family advocate bill. And the reason we want a family advocate is so people like Rachel and Bailey do not have to walk into a courtroom alone from the very first court appearance, from the very first interview. They just need to have somebody to be able to explain to them the process and give them some of the warnings of what they need to be prepared for and to help them understand the quickest path to be able to make this be resolved. So we asked for a family advocate bill. So happy. Terry's good relationship with Alabama. We had a very conservative Republican Barry Moore sponsor it. We got a Democrat co-sponsor who did not win re-election, so we don't have a Democrat now. But we also have a full red Congress now, so maybe we don't need a Democrat sponsor. But we did not get it passed because I really think it was just too late in the year and too much election stuff was going on. So we just went back in January and we're going back again in April and we're continuing to ask for the same thing. In the meantime, trust me, in the back of my head, I am ever present thinking about getting rid of CAPTA. And the whole thing has to be rewritten from scratch. And until we can demonetize these children, and all kinds of other things are going on around this. People have been sharing with me like this AI that they have out there generating basically at-risk children, which if you ever saw Tom Cruise's Minority Report, the pre-crime division, it's basically a pre-crime division for CPS. And they have in Vermont, there's a class action lawsuit now where they've tagged pregnant moms who have risk factors, either poverty, lack of medical care, maybe some type of medication, mental health issues. They're going in Vermont and taking the babies out of their arms in the hospital. And all over the United States. So the court system is involved both from the aspect of removing the children wrongfully, having these horrible court processes. And then at the federal level in the court system, there's a whole nother thing going on. And that is these class action lawsuits, civil rights litigation, showing that, trying to point out some of these due process issues. So the number one thing is money. That's it. It's money, 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 money at every level. And, as much as we talk about, oh, isn't due process bad? Oh, they seem to be corrupt. They seem to be prejudiced. They seem to be biased. Until we can kick the money in the knees, we are going to continue to face this problem. And honestly, in the court system, they don't want to talk about it. I've brought it up in the court system. Judge, they want this kid so they can make money. Oh, they don't make money off of children. Oh, 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 oh. So that's the number one issue. And I welcome anybody else's contribution to that.
I want to hear from everybody. Kathy, did you have some questions?
Not really. I'm fascinated by the whole subject because it's not, I'm thinking about it in terms of how we can better phrase what we use for measurements than I am, because there's a basic law of government, and that is what gets measured gets money.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Thank you for
the best thing to have happen, because if it's not the right thing getting measured, but they're going to continue,
Well, so on our last trip to DC, one of the things I said, I think in every meeting was, and I've said it to them before, is you don't even know what neglect is. You don't even know what are the precursor events in these families that are causing them to be even brought to the attention to the system in the first place? And when you look at the thousands and thousands and thousands of referrals that there are, the bottom line that the substantiation number, or those who are, quote, found guilty, is still a very small percentage of that. But even of that small percentage, a lot of those are wrongful removals, and the effects are devastating. So, and I'm going to give you, and you all just, if you think I'm talking too much, just like put your finger up and I'll just like totally zip it. But at any time, okay, go. But, I was just in a state legislative meeting. We have this thing in Tennessee called Second Look Commission. And Second Look Commission is supposed to be looking about every child who re-entered the foster care system after a period of time. And I mean, the results are horrible in and of itself, because it showed that 63% of the children that re-entered foster care were white pre-teenage girls, and they were re-entering because of sexual abuse. I'm like, this is like bad. But the point is that so many times either they're not measuring the right things because they don't know what is taking them there, or they're taking such a small sliver of their sample, their N number, right, to do their research is so small, it's garbage in, garbage out. At the Second Look Commission, they were saying, 60% of teenagers think about suicide. And at least one legislator said, where do you get that number? That sounds a little high. And then they said, well, we do a self-report survey with, high schoolers in certain schools, so you don't even know, what your N number is or who your subjects are.
Yes, I want to hear from reactions from Rachel. Go ahead.
Okay, just wanted to add, from running the nonprofit this year alone, I have helped about 5 families with gas cards, with hotel rooms, with mechanic issues, with water bills, with heating bills. All these things lead to CPS investigations, right? And it's something so simple and so basic. If we're going to talk about funding and we're going to talk about money, if the government wants this funding, right, why not give it to actually help the families as opposed to removing the child, right? One family had 11 children and they were on a dual income. They had 2 incomes. Due to a medical emergency, the mom had to have surgery, was not able to work, so now they're on 1 income with 11 children. And their water bill was $711 in California. So they were like on the brink. The teachers are mandated reporters, was going to have to report this. And we were able to step in and pay that bill for them. Right. So something very simple that the government could be actually doing to help families.